Good afternoon. I'm going to be talking about climate change, the challenge, and the emerging alternatives in India. I want to begin by thanking Professor Brown and Professor Perkins for considering me for sharing my ideas with all of you. I'm also very grateful to Molly for guiding me through all the administrative and technical steps. Professor Brown has asked me to talk about how the resource intensive Western lifestyle is contributing to the environmental stresses in developing countries like India. And Professor Perkins has further instructed me to focus on how climate change is affecting people and economies in India and how to deal with these issues both locally and globally. So let's start with the Indian encounter with the West, which unfolded from the 16th century onwards, from explorations to trade to economic interventions, and a final political takeover by the British in the mid 19th century. The Industrial Revolution was gathering steam in Europe when the first tangible contacts occurred between the West and India. It had allowed the British to abandon their restraint on resource exploitation, and they gradually unleashed that changed mindset on India as they became politically dominant. E. A. Smithies, in his book India's Forest Wealth, published in 1925, states that until the later decades of the 19th century, the Raj carried out a fierce onslaught of the subcontinent's forests. As oak forests disappeared in England, the demand shifted to India, particularly for teak for shipbuilding, and huge swaths of forests were felled in that process. Himalayan forests also came under pressure for the supply of railway sleepers and then for railway fuel before coal became available. Between 1869 and 1885, more than 6.5 million deodar cedar trees were supplied from the Yamuna forest in the western Himalayas for railway sleepers, rapidly denuding the hillsides. The havoc caused by the British to the Indian environment was a significant part of the colonial project of extreme exploitation of India to ensure the continued prosperity of the kingdom. Mahatma Gandhi made it a point to critique the resource intensive nature of the modern Western civilization as part of the Indian freedom struggle. When asked if he would like India to be as prosperous as Britain, he said, "It took Britain half the resources of the planet to achieve this prosperity. How many planets will a country like India require?" End quote. But what was even more enlightening was his assessment of the destruction of nature in the light of the toll that was taking on our collective humanity. Gandhi declared, "What we are doing to the forests is but a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to each other." End quote. Gandhi introduced the seminal idea of Swaraj or self rule to the intellectual debate against British colonialism. For him, the term was not confined to its literal meaning, and Gandhi expanded it to connote the idea of self restraint. Swaraj for him was as much of a guiding principle of his life as were non-violence and truth. Gandhi wanted the quest for independence to be a quest for self restraint and not just self rule. He said, "Swaraj will be the fruit of patience, perseverance, ceaseless toil, courage, and intelligent appreciation of the environment." Gandhi wanted to prepare the ground for establishing a socio-economic system in post-independence India, which was not subservient to technology and machines, and which was not mired in self-delusional consumerist greed. Unfortunately, however, Gandhi's ideas never found much traction among his comrades in the Congress Party. Nehru, his much anointed successor, was a committed modernist who paid enough lip service to Gandhi's ideas till he was alive, but steered the country away towards a command economy after becoming the country's first prime minister. For almost the first 5 decades after independence, India steered clear of the free market mode of development. characterized by protectionism, import substitution, state monitored industrialization, and centralized planning, the economy grew at a slow pace. The environmental situation in the country consequently stayed largely under control just because the growth in industrialization and commerce was contained by the languid nature of the command economy. All that changed in the 90s when, due to a balance of payment crisis, the country lurched into a sappy and unctuous embrace of, of international capital in 1991. There's much hype in the Indian media about the advancement made by the economy under liberalization, but the benefits accruing from the dysfunctional economic development have stayed consistently out of the reach of the India's poor. According to Credit Suisse Global Wealth Data Book 2014, the richest 10% in India now hold three-quarter of the total wealth. They also hold 370 times the share of wealth that its bottom 10% have. For the super rich, the top 1%, the results are even more breathtaking. They now account for nearly half of the country's total wealth, about $1.75 trillion. The picture for the underprivileged, however, is quite different and glaringly dismal. 30 years ago, before India opened up its economy, India accounted for about one-fifth of the world's poorest. Today, close to one-third of those, or about 400 million, live in India. The Indian elite, on the other hand, is moving on a completely different trajectory, accruing enormous benefits from the market driven economy and aspiring to a lifestyle on par with the global elite, which obviously puts inordinate pressure on the Indian ecology. As two of my colleagues and prominent Indian environmentalists, Ashish Kothari and Asim Srivastav, have pointed out in their book, Churning the Earth, per capita ecological footprint of the richest 1% in India is 17 times that of the poorest 40%, already above the global acceptable limit of 1.8 global hectares of consumption of Earth's resources. The implications of continuing to pursue this model of development are enormous and scary. Sea levels in India are expected to rise at 2.5 millimeter per year according to the IPCC. The total increase will be 38 centimeters by 2050. According to a Greenpeace study, around 120 million people will be rendered homeless in India and the neighboring Bangladesh by 2100. India today is home to 6 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world. A troubling study done in 2013 by the Chess Research Foundation in 5 Indian cities revealed that Indians had 30% lower lung function than average Europeans. The study, which was done on healthy, non smoking individuals, found air pollution to be the chief reason for this result. Water pollution has its own sordid story. Out of India's 3,119 towns and cities, just 209 have partial sewage treatment facilities, and only 8 have full wastewater treatment facilities. Ganga, the iconic Indian river, is a case in point. 2,723 million liters a day of sewage is generated by 50 cities located along the river and duly discharged into it. Not surprisingly, coliform bacteria levels in the Ganga have been routinely tested at 5,500 and higher. This should prohibit the use of its waters for agriculture, let alone drinking and bathing. I could go on about the solid waste catastrophe overtaking the Indian cities, as well as the countryside. Weather patterns have become erratic and unreliable. Floods and heavy rains are becoming rampant. Glaciers are receding. Water sources are drying up. Neoliberal extractivism is making deep inroads into the hinterland, giving rise to the biggest ultra-left rebellion in the world. And that is an untold story which the government tries to keep under wraps from the rest of the world. What more should I talk about without overwhelming you or myself? The question you would probably ask is there any sign of redemption in the midst of this depressing turmoil? And I would tell you, yes, there is. Given the increasing marginalization of the vast majority of the poor and the disempowered from the process of economic growth in India, alternatives are being forged by grassroots communities which blend current and evolving ideas on environmental and economic justice with the communities' assertion of their traditional rights vis a vis their commons and the opportunities they afford them for localizing and creating self reliant economic networks. Let's look at a couple of these cases. Malka Initiative, a decentralized field to fabric cotton textile chain. Going back briefly to colonial history, the decline of the Indian handloom industry, which was directly related to the stifling spread of British imperialism in India. As the Indian artisan lost out to the mill-made cloth being imported from England, the Indian farmer was compelled to abandon local cotton varieties for the long-stapled American cotton, which was stronger and was more suited to machine processing. But being a non-native variety, it could neither resist local pests nor could it withstand droughts. In fact, it required high amount of irrigation for it to grow. Consequently, the input costs grew substantially for the farmer, while he had no safety net if the crop failed. In recent years, monocropping and intense use of pesticides had left farmers' lands poisoned and ultimately unsuited to farming. Consequent impoverishment and indebtedness often resulted in farmers' suicides in these areas. The Malka Initiative is a response to these troubling developments. Fabrics are woven from cotton grown by small farmers close to the handlooms, thus making the entire textile chain village based. Consequently, weavers don't have to migrate to ghettos around urban mills and are able to practice their traditional skills in their own villages. Also, newly designed machines being used now for manufacturing have brought down the process to a human scale. Another interesting spin off of the initiative is that local varieties of cotton require less irrigation and other inputs and are traditionally intercropped with pulses, thus maintaining the nutrient levels of the soil. Socially and politically, the re-emergence of the strong link between farming and local textile production creates a new sense of empowerment in the community. Malka is not only a carbon neutral and ecologically sustainable model, it is also economically profitable, as 60 to 70% of the actual cost of mill made cotton is owed to its transport to and from the mill. The most important factor making it highly economically sustainable is that the Malka process eliminates mills and middlemen and distributes the profits amongst the artisans directly. The goal of the Malka initiative is to put all aspects of production, including management, in the hands of the producers, the people who do the actual work. In other words, to achieve true democracy in production. Unlike the corporate model where almost the entire cadre of top executives is drawn from the elite sectors of society, the Malka model can be run and managed by people who do not have access to expensive education or who do not come from a privileged or business background. Malka is just one of the many initiatives which are pushing back on the neoliberal corporate agenda in India. Movement activists, academics, thinkers, and practitioners of alternatives, indigenous and rural communities, and artists and communicators are coming together in search of new alternatives. And Vikalp Sangam, or the Confluence of Alternatives, is a unique initiative which is trying to explore and understand alternative thinking and organizing on a large spectrum of economic, social, and environmental issues in India. The chief aim of this endeavor is to create a platform where initiatives in search of alternatives reach a large audience and become a viable forum for discussion, analysis, and eventual replication in other places. Vikalp Sangam is a collaborative effort started in 2014 by four independent, prominent Indian NGOs: Kalpavriksh, Bhumi, Shikshantar, and Deccan Development Society, which have been actively seeking solutions to environmental, developmental, and educational challenges confronting the country. In the last 3 years, the initiative has established an active website for dissemination of news and views on the alternatives, issues, and practices, and also held regional and subject specific conclaves to bring thinkers and practitioners together to learn from each other and to further sharpen the debate. These conclaves are a space for people to exchange experiences and ideas emerging from practice and thinking in a whole range of endeavor: sustainable agriculture and pastoralism, renewable energy, decentralized governance, community health, craft and art revival, multiple sexualities, inclusion of the differently abled, alternative learning and education, community based conservation, decentralized water management, urban sustainability, gender and caste equality, and more. People practicing and conceiving some of the most amazing initiatives in the country have been able to get together and share. Beyond the sharing of practical experiences, however, one of the most important outputs of the Vikalp Sangam process is a conceptual framework of transformative alternatives. This framework is constantly evolving after discussions at each Sangam. Several hundred people from the range of sectors mentioned above have debated the various aspects of the framework. A huge treasure trove of opinions, facts, theories, and data is emerging out of the various Vikalp Sangam conclaves and is helping the evolution of alternatives thinking in India. It has initiated the process by which a fundamental and transformative systemic change could be introduced into the society for the construction of a new political economy that moves beyond both corporate capitalism and state socialism and towards the creation of what we call radical ecological democracy based on climate justice, environmental sustainability, and socio-economic quality. We are very excited about the progress we've made and where the Vikalp Sangha initiative can take us. Thank you so much.